Good morning. Today I thought I'd say something about renunciation in Buddhism. I think we can have quite a narrow view of what renunciation is, so we probably associate that word with somebody with a shaved head, wearing robes and carrying a begging bowl, which you don't come across many people, if any people in this country doing that. They'd probably be rather cold and hungry. But anyway, I think because it's an unpopular word, because it's not a word that perhaps we relate to very easily, I thought I'd say something about it. Because some days ago I said in the middle of a talk, I didn't expand on it, that there's no spiritual life without renunciation. There's no spiritual life without renunciation. So what is it that we're renouncing? Well, one way that you can see Buddhism is a shedding of what's not very useful to us. So it's easy to think when we come across something like Buddhism that actually we're acquiring something. We're adding to who we are, to what we already are. Maybe adding knowledge, adding various practices and so on. But we're already very full of knowledge and ways of doing things and so on. And often we're too full up to really take in any more, to really be receptive. So learning how to be receptive is also an important part of Buddhism. But coming back to what is it that we're shedding? Well, in some ways, we're shedding parts of our conditioning, parts of certainly our habits. So, of course, some of our habits are very skillful and very useful to us. But many of our habits are not very useful. And one thing that really does fascinate me is, why is it that although we know what's good for us, we know what makes us feel more content and happy and at ease and so on, we find it really hard to do those things. Maybe for some people it's even hard to get up and meditate in the morning. So why is that? It's almost like we've got a little demon inside ourselves that is working against what we know would be really helpful for us. So what that tells us is that our everyday mind has very deep habits that drive us in ways that don't serve us ultimately. The trouble is that they often serve us immediately. So we look for immediate gains, immediate pleasures, rather than long-term benefits. So that's very important, to see that. So practice, we talk about Buddhist practice, and that is what it is. It's a practice. And as we know, for anything that's worth doing well, for anything that a skill that we want to acquire, we have to practice. You're not going to be able to play a Beethoven sonata if you don't practice every day, if you don't practice a lot. So I was looking last night at the young musician contest, and it was the pianists, and the youngest one there was 11 competing, and he'd been practicing for 3 or 4 hours a day at age 11. That is clarity of purpose, and we need clarity of purpose if we're going to transform ourselves, if we're really going to move in the direction of Buddhahood. So, when we practice, when we chant the precepts, for example, in in the puja, we are dedicating ourselves to shedding our unskillfulness. We're saying we want to do that. And saying it out loud in the context of the spiritual community alongside other people is very helpful, because we're declaring it with friends, we're saying it in front of others, and that's very useful. So it's one thing thinking things, and it's another actually doing them. So it's worth thinking about, what is it in our behaviour, what is it in our body, speech and mind that is unhelpful, that wastes our life on useless thinking and so on. What is it that we need to renounce? Well, one thing you can do is keep a chart, maybe for a couple of days, on what you spend your time doing. So from the time you wake up in the morning, what is it that gets your attention? And after a couple of days of doing that, you could look at how much of your day, how many of these things you've been doing, are you really pleased that you did? So, I'm not talking about let's meditate all day or study Buddhism all day by any means, but how much of our tasks do we do with awareness, with mindfulness? So that's worth asking, because obviously a lot of the things we do to keep ourselves healthy, to stay alive and so on, are necessary. But we can do them in all sorts of ways. We can do them just to get them out of the way, or we can do them with mindfulness and really enjoy them. So, do you enjoy everything that you do? It's really worth thinking about that. Do you enjoy everything you do? And could you enjoy it more if you renounced, say, your preferences, if you renounced your longing for something else at the time you were doing it? So for example, you might be washing up and you're really rushing to wash up because you just want to do something else. You see it as a chore. In a way, nothing should be a chore, not anything. We might have to do things, but we don't have to see them as chores. So by calling something a chore, we're saying we don't want to do it. We'd rather somebody else be doing it, or we'd rather not be doing it. So it's a mindset, isn't it? And we can renounce something like that mindset. We can really look at what we're doing. When we're washing up, we can feel the water. We can enjoy looking at the bubbles. We can take pleasure in a clean, sparkling cup or whatever it is. So how often do we do that? So yes, if, for example, you were to have a couple of days where you wrote down everything you did, you could look at parts of your life that actually maybe you feel, looking back, that actually they didn't do you much good. So maybe that was, drinking a bottle of wine slumped in front of the television. Or maybe you spent too long playing computer games. Maybe you were quite argumentative. I mean, after all, it's quite something to be at home, maybe with people that you're not used to being with 24 hours a day. So, yeah, if we can bring renunciation down to earth, if we can see that actually what we're trying to renounce is that which is unhelpful to us, our habits, if we can simplify, if we can not see anything as chores, but to see our engagement, our mindful engagement in everything, then there'll be nothing you do in your life that feels a chore. Wouldn't that be nice? So I'm going to leave it there.